Chapter 2. Haven. Bishop. "You're on speaker," Maggie told him. "I'm here with John. Sorry to call so late, although I have no idea whether it's late where you are." Being Bishop, he didn't answer the implied question. "Let me guess, one of your operatives hasn't checked in." Maggie exchanged looks with her husband. "That didn't sound like a guess," she said. "You have an agent in Tennessee?" "For a while now." This time it was John who said Agent Nash led us to believe his escaped fugitive was a recent problem. Probably was recent to him. Noah Bishop, chief of the Special Crimes Unit, sounded as calm as usual. "The problem part, I mean? Cole Jacoby was officially in custody and halfway across Virginia 2 weeks ago. Neither of the agents responsible for him could quite explain how he managed to slip his leash. In fact, they had a number of unexplained gaps in their memories, lengthy gaps." "Both of them?" Maggie asked. "Both missing the same memories?" "The same time gaps, at least. No physical injuries, and nothing showed up on the medical tests, including any signs of drugs or other known toxins. But they're experienced agents, and they'd never lost a prisoner during a transfer before Jacoby." "SCU?" Maggie asked the question, even knowing the answer. "No. We wouldn't oversee or be part of the transfer of a prisoner unless he was psychic, and we knew it." "I'm liking this lesson less," John said. "You suspect Jacoby is psychic? That's why you sent an agent to Tennessee?" "By some means we don't yet understand, the memories of 2 experienced agents were tampered with. The vehicle was clean, no sign it was bumped or run off the road or otherwise stopped. All the prints inside and on the doors belonged to the agents or the prisoner, which is pretty strong evidence no one else was involved. And yet, at some point during what should have been a routine prisoner transfer, with their prisoners safely cuffed in the back seat, 2 experienced agents lost that prisoner, and a chunk of time. Someone or something was responsible for that. If it was Jacoby, I need to know how he managed it." Maggie spoke slowly. "Because we don't have an agent or operative capable of manipulating memories or imposing their will on others, not psychically." "Exactly." "How'd you place him in Tennessee?" John wanted to know. "Was Nash straight about that?" "The manhunt was already underway when I was officially notified about it," Bishop said without commenting on the second question. "Standard operating procedure, since we were expecting him. And the only thing that stuck out a bit about this particular fugitive was that he didn't seem to be in much of a hurry, lingering in the general area where he escaped, around Arlington, long enough to be spotted more than once, always in a different car. And then there's the dogs." Maggie and John exchanged looks, and she was the one who asked, "Dogs?" "Yeah. The last time we believe he was spotted, the witness swore he had at least 3 large dogs in the car with him. It was only after that he picked up his pace and left the area, neatly avoiding checkpoints or any law enforcement contact, despite the bolo out on him. He ditched cars a couple more times, and despite his countermeasure of removing or destroying any GPS units, the cars were found with relative speed and ease, and forensics did find dog hair as well as his prints and DNA in the abandoned cars." "Not exactly worried about being nailed for Grand Theft Auto," John mused, "or escaping custody." "If he does have a $10 million stash from his last heist, probably not." Maggie asked, "Do we know where he got the dogs?" "An informant who shared a prison cell with him for a short time claims he talked almost continually about his dogs he raised from pups. Said he had a trusted pal on the outside taking care of them until he got out. So far we haven't been able to identify said pal, though he must have been within the area where Jacoby spent the most time after his escape and before he finally took off." Bishop paused a moment, then added dryly, "My guess is that once he was paid for looking after the dogs, and undoubtedly paid well, he headed straight for an island somewhere with no extradition with the U.S., there to live happily ever after." "Do people still do that?" Maggie wondered aloud, but absently. "I like to hope so," Bishop responded. John kept them on track, but Jacoby took the time to get his dogs, even knowing every law enforcement agency in the east had to be looking for him, and then he headed for the mountains. So it appears, despite changing cars a couple more times, Jacoby was traced as far as the Tennessee state line. No reports in the area of a stolen car, no dealer in the area has any record of selling a car to him, and the shady dealers were all under close observation because we had an escaped felon in the area. I doubt he went anywhere near them. The feeling was he planned ahead and planned well. He must have had a vehicle stashed and waiting for him, possibly courtesy of the same friend who kept his dogs for him while he was locked up. The vehicle had to be a Jeep or truck, maybe even a Humvee, definitely a serious four-wheel drive, fully gassed up and ready to go. Tracking dogs followed a trail through rough terrain to an old logging road, heading up into the mountains, then lost the scent. John said, I gather the road was explored for about a mile until it was blocked by several trees, big trees, felled recently by hand, not by nature. Exploring on foot farther in, the search team found more trees blocking the way, a road growing less and less worthy of the name, and terrain so rough the rangers claimed only highly experienced and very athletic hikers could keep going. No sign of his vehicle, though. No sign. Decoy? Maybe. Maybe he created a diversion and took another path into the mountains. In any case, as per procedure, that's when the nearest field office would have been notified. Nash, John said, was he told what you suspected? Like Maggie, he asked a question already knowing the answer. No. The official report listed Jacoby as an escaped felon, a bank robber possibly armed, which is true as far as it goes. He's suspected of half a dozen fairly minor heists in the last 10 years or so, but was never charged for lack of evidence. He was known to use a gun, but had never, to our knowledge, harmed anyone or even fired the gun. But this heist was different. One, he was rather uncharacteristically caught on camera and easily identified. And two, the fact that he'd stolen $10 million still unaccounted for made him a very valuable fugitive indeed. John mused. Must have been some bank if they had $10 million on hand. Yes, Bishop said. As it happened, this bank was a hub for other banks and for various investment firms. 9/10 of that money was scheduled to be transferred to a Federal Reserve Bank the day following that of the robbery. Still musing, John said, and Jacoby just happened to hit it on the right day. It was a question. The theory is he had someone on the inside. Investigation of that possibility is ongoing. You don't believe it? No, not the way Jacoby works, which begs the question. How did he know so much money would be there? John finished. He has some computer skills, never known as a hacker, but maybe he didn't waste his time inside. That money should have been protected by layers of electronic security, but nothing's foolproof, and we all know security is usually at best an illusion. If someone wants in badly enough and has the skills, they get in. Realizing, Maggie said that's the kind of skill even more valuable than bank robbery itself, skill the law enforcement community would want to understand, and he wouldn't give up easily. They were bringing him to you for questioning? To the SCU, and yes, because traditional means of interrogation had netted them exactly nothing. Normally, we would have gone to him for the interview, but he was being transferred near here because he'd been making noises about trading the location of the money for a reduced sentence and better accommodations. Nobody really wanted to make that deal, but judging by the security video evidence and as far as we could otherwise determine, Jacoby hadn't worked with a partner who might have talked, assuming we were able to locate him or her. The investigation into the robbery had turned up zip for leads, so he was and is still our only link to the money. Bothered, Maggie said, if you could manipulate someone else's mind, I'm surprised you didn't try it sooner. He may have tried, Bishop reminded her, and failed, or succeeded in some way we haven't discovered yet. That may well have been the way he was able to choose the right bank on the right day, and that could have been his first measurable success. We have no way of knowing for sure. If there's anything our experiences have taught us, It's that even with training and practice, many of us can control our abilities only erratically. Practically, John said, or maybe he just bided his time and used what leverage he had to manipulate the situation until the odds were more in his favor. He was alone with only a couple of agents and had a better chance of escaping. Maybe so, Bishop agreed. In any case, he escaped. He didn't make the 10 most wanted list because he's not believed to be a violent criminal. But recapturing him could go a long way toward promoting an agent stuck in a backwater field office. Which, John said, explains why Nash called us instead of the SCU. We don't need or want the public credit for that sort of success, but if another agent or unit within the FBI did the work, it would certainly be known inside the Bureau. Yes, said Bishop. Maggie said, and since you've been your usual secretive self, it wouldn't be in any of the reports or alerts that you suspected Jacoby of being a psychic. Dryly, Bishop said, I generally keep suspicion of possible psychic activity out of reports unless and until I'm certain, and sometimes even then. There are, after all, still some in and out of the Bureau who refer to us as the Spooky Crimes Unit. You knew it'd be an uphill battle for respect, John reminded him with a trace of amusement. Yeah, and a long one. In any case, the case paperwork on Nash, the reports and stats on his crimes and on him as an escape felon contained nothing indicating any interest from the SCU. Yet you have an agent in Tennessee. We had reason to believe he'd head in that direction. Before he escaped? Maggie asked curiously. When he escaped, almost immediately, Bishop replied, unusually forthcoming with information. Maggie frowned slightly. He headed into a wilderness, John reminded, in the patient tone of one accustomed to dealing with the SCU's infamously enigmatic chief. Into a state our information has him with absolutely no connection to, no family, no friends, no past job, nothing. Far as any discoverable records go, he never set foot in the state before. And you managed to place an agent close to where he'd eventually settle? Within 5 miles, I believe, possibly even closer, and we're reasonably sure he's hidden out in that general area before. Information not worth sharing. John's voice remained patient, even as his wife smiled at him wryly. Not until now. Your operative needed to be there. Even more, he needed to locate Jacoby himself, at least initially. Some things just have to happen the way they happen, Maggie said. Yes. Life lesson or psychic lesson? John asked, honestly curious. 6 of 1. Briskly, Bishop continued, I have an agent in place with an excellent cover story that can be maintained almost indefinitely if necessary. An agent with specific instructions to observe for a time sufficient to reveal anything unusual and then report back so that we'll know before he's officially approached by non-SCU law enforcement agents whether Cole Jacoby has any psychic ability. And if he does, John asked slowly, if he has enough psychic ability to affect your agent? Imperturbable, Bishop replied, then he'll be a very, very special psychic indeed. And Nash will be stuck in that field office a while longer. Because Jacoby will become an SCU target. He's already an SCU target. We just aren't sure, yet, what sort of threat he might pose, how much manpower it'll take to get him, and whether we need to intervene officially or leave it to Nash and his people. The initial readings on Jacoby were indeterminate. Is that as unusual as it sounds? John wanted to know. It's troubling, Bishop admitted. Getting away from the agents, transporting him, and then making it into a wilderness where it was virtually impossible to follow him took careful planning and considerable, cool-headed reasoning. But since then, his observed actions have been erratic, to say the least. Erratic how? Let's just say he hasn't been very welcoming, even to innocent game hunters just passing by his place. He's called attention to himself, which I would have guessed isn't part of his original plan. Locals are talking about him, And insular though they may be, nobody wants a dangerous armed stranger up on the mountain near their town. Local law enforcement? John asked. Not moved to intervene so far, but that could change. Bishop paused, then added, wherever he hid his stash, it isn't where he is now, or at least we don't believe it is. And yet he's become aggressively protective of the remote cabin he rented up in the mountains. John and Maggie exchanged glances, both silently hearing the admission that whether he had known before sending his agent, Bishop most certainly knew now exactly where Cole Jacoby was staying, but neither of them commented on that. He is a wanted fugitive, Maggie pointed out. I'd expect him to be protective of his location. Protective in very specific ways, Bishop said without saying much of anything at all. John sighed. Well, I know better than to ask. You'll tell us whatever it is you're holding back if and when you're ready to. But can you at least put Maggie's mind to rest and tell her Luther is all right? He's being taken care of as we speak, Bishop replied. Remind me again why we're doing this? Hollis Templeton's voice wasn't exactly nervous, except around the edges. Her partner, Reese DeMarco, perfectly aware of the nerves, answered patiently. Because you told Bishop weeks ago that you wanted to learn to interact with spirits outside our investigations without the pressures of chasing bad guys. Yeah, and our options to do so openly and without our badges are rather limited. Either you're some kind of paranormal investigator like we were in Barren Hollow in July, which would involve carting along a lot of equipment we don't need, or else you bill yourself as a medium and offer your services to allow loved ones to talk with the dead. But a seance? Seriously? At least Bishop didn't ask you for a turban or a dozen jangling fake gold bracelets. Hollis turned her head and glared at him. You're not helping. DeMarco kept his attention on his driving as he navigated a rather winding mountain country blacktop in the waning twilight. Sorry, but you did ask, Hollis, and it's a good idea to explore the limits of your abilities whenever we have time between cases. In theory, she muttered. Well, we don't have too many ways to explore. To learn to control, he said. We spend hours in the lab. Whenever the researchers come up with new tests, but we all know psychics don't do well in lab conditions, so we seldom learn anything new about ourselves or our abilities. And then we're in the field on cases where hunting down the bad guys and staying alive in the process is a little more imperative than learning how to talk to spirits not involved in the investigation. Hollis was silent for a moment, then said, It was that girl in the hospital when we were waiting to see if Diana would pull through. Wandering the halls, literally a lost soul. It's been 6 months since that investigation, and I still can't get her out of my mind. When she asked me if there was supposed to be a light, I didn't have an answer for her, or the time to try to help her find the answer she needed. And so we do this, DeMarco said patiently. You talk to spirits without the pressure of an investigation and try to help them. And if the client wants a seance as the setting, so be it. Easy for you to say, Hollis muttered. Listen, I'm not going to do the candle thing or hold hands around the table or any of that stuff. Certainly no Ouija board. Those things are dangerous. And I won't pretend to go into a trance. If I have to do a seance, it'll be my way. Suits me, though it might disappoint the client. According to what background info we were given, she's had readings from every psychic and would-be psychic in about a dozen places in and around Tennessee. Even went all the way to California a couple months back. Which hasn't made her brother-in-law very happy. Yeah, I remember from the brief. He thinks she's wasting money at best and being robbed blind at worst. Not exactly what you call a believer. Something else we've run into before and will again. Might as well practice dealing with that too. In any case, our information is there were no kids and her husband's brother stands to inherit as the only Alexander left. Maybe he just wants to protect what he believes he has coming to him. Some of those psychics charge pretty steep fees. I'm not charging anything at all. Yeah, but I'm betting the brother-in-law doesn't believe that. He'll be looking for the hook, whatever you say. just waiting for whatever it is you intend to use to draw his sister-in-law into your con and eventually relieve her of some of her and his money. Hollis frowned. I hate it when anything is about money. I'm also a little worried about whether I can see the spirit at all. He's been gone, nearly 2 years? Nearly. So maybe he's gone on to wherever most spirits go eventually. Despite popular belief, most of them don't seem to stick around very long. We'll find out soon enough, DeMarco said, turning the car in between two rather imposing brick pillars flanking a brick driveway that wound off into the distance. Glum, Hollis said, damn it, even the driveway cost a fortune, or was laid back when brick was relatively cheap to use and labor even cheaper. I bet this is an old house filled with history and spirits. Family home for about a century and a half, if I remember. Lovely. Probably lots of feuding went on over the decades. A philandering husband or cheating wife caught and dispatched. A suicide or 3. An axe murderer 2 generations ago. With a slight smile, DeMarco said, don't recall mention of an axe murderer. He probably got away with it, Hollis said, still gloomy. No bodies found, right? Right. So he buried them in the rose garden, or cut them up into little pieces and tossed them into that river we passed a mile or so back, or fed them to pigs. Ghoulish, he noted. I'm going to talk to the dead. I can be ghoulish if I want to. It does cast a whole new light on bacon, though, doesn't it? I mean that pigs are omnivores and will eat anything. That's why I eat turkey bacon, mostly. Ignoring the tangent, DeMarco said it's not as easy as most people would suppose to dismember a body, especially with an axe. It takes a lot of muscle and quite a bit of skill. Never mind making a hell of a mess. It'd be difficult to hide or cover up afterward. All right. Hollis turned her head to stare at him, frowning. Why don't you just tell me when I'm being an unreasonable pain in the ass? Where's the fun in that? Hollis couldn't help but laugh a little when he sent her one of his quick, curiously crooked smiles. Yeah. Your idea of a nice break between cases is to babysit me. Not exactly the way I think of it, DeMarco replied, adding immediately, if there are any spirits at the Alexander family home, they'll probably be waiting and ready for us, for you. You're broadcasting. She sighed, perfectly aware that controlling that particular psychic ability was not exactly one of her strengths, and useless to even try whenever she was in the company of a telepath as powerful as DeMarco. Emotions or thoughts? A jumble of both. Hollis, you can do this, you know. Yeah? What if another spirit asks me why there's no light to guide them, wherever it is they're supposed to go? What do I tell them? Follow your instincts. They're actually pretty good. Hollis didn't want to admit out loud that she found it reassuring to hear that from him. Then again, since he was a telepath and she couldn't turn off her psychic broadcast full wattage button, he probably knew anyway. Damn it. She returned her attention forward just as the car rounded a curve and their destination loomed unnervingly large and very well lit 100 yards or so ahead. Jesus, she muttered, it's a castle. It has turrets. Only 2, DeMarco murmured. Hollis was too busy dealing with her sense of intimidation and unease to laugh as she studied the house looming ever larger as they approached. Stone, some sections of it covered with ivy, numerous windows with the small panes that usually signaled considerable age, and a huge grand front door that looked as if it would require a draft horse to pull it open. There were at least 3 floors, at least 2 wings in addition to the main section of the house. The 2 turrets DeMarco had noted, and battlements, or at least what Hollis tentatively identified as battlements. Walkways high up between the turrets at roof level designed for guards to walk and scan the countryside for danger, like the threat of some army storming the place. Which is very weird for an American structure, very few of which had experienced a threat of that kind since the Alamo. Besides which, this was a home, not a fortress, she hoped. Jesus, she repeated, who are these people? Old money, DeMarco replied succinctly, and I'm guessing whoever built this place had a lengthy European trip behind them that inspired this sort of architecture. No kidding. Also a family that made damn sure of their privacy. They might not have a moat around the place, but it took us nearly an hour on decent blacktop roads to get here from the main highway, and 30 minutes on that from the nearest town. Imagine how long it would have taken anyone 100 years ago. I doubt they got many visitors, DeMarco agreed, and those who came probably stayed a week or longer, even a month, even a summer. It was common among people of that time, and this sort of wealth. Damn, you don't think they'll ask us to stay, do you? If that isn't a haunted house, I don't know spirits at all. Other than a hospital, I can't think of a place I'd feel less inclined to spend the night. Suppose that depends on how long the seance lasts, DeMarco said practically. It's nearly dark, and by the time you're done, it's likely to be fairly late. Depending on how pleased our hostess is with her reading, always assuming you can make contact. If you can't tell her what she wants to hear, I bet she'll want more than one reading. And if I can tell her what she wants to hear? In that case, she may try to hire you to be her personal psychic. With considerable feeling, Hollis said, thank goodness I already have a job. DeMarco parked the car a dozen yards from the front door and said, well, right now your other job demands that you try your hand at contacting a spirit. Probably only because his nearest and dearest wants to know that he's at peace, except for missing her as much as she misses him, of course. Cynic. Realist. Come on, let's go. Hollis gathered herself and prepared to get out of the car, but couldn't help muttering a final, oh man, I know I'm going to regret this. And it was really more than a hunch. Haven. Maggie Garrett said, so you're certain your agent can protect himself? Herself? Herself, Bishop replied. An especially strong shield? And instinctive, or at least unconscious. She doesn't have to think about it to block, maybe even repel energy. To most of our other psychics, telepaths included, behind her shield she reads as a sort of null field, as if she's not really there. Maggie murmured, psychic stealth mode. John said, no, that sounds creepy. It can be, Bishop allowed, adding dryly, not many people can sneak up on me. She can. But that seems to be more a side effect of her shield than a separate psychic ability. Her real strength is in detecting, measuring, and possibly repelling negative energy. And when she encounters it, she does more than detect it, she becomes hyper-aware. What about positive energy? When she lets down her shield, which she has to consciously do, most of our telepaths have been able to communicate with her easily and with complete thoughts rather than just snippets or impressions, so she's receptive to positive energy. A small percentage of our telepaths couldn't send or receive anything, even though her shield was down. We're not sure if it was due to their abilities or hers, or just one of those days when one or all of them weren't able to control their abilities. She's also a telepath? Yeah, she is a telepath, though it seems secondary to both her shielding abilities and her abilities to detect and repel negative energy. So far, at any rate. Maggie said 3 distinct abilities. More like 2, Bishop replied. Our theory is that her mind developed the shield to protect itself from negative energy, so those 2 abilities are likely connected. The telepathy began as her primary ability, and the others developed only when she was exposed to negative energy? I believe so, Bishop said. Maggie waited a moment, then said, you're not going to tell us when and how that happened? That's her story, part of her history, not mine to share. John sighed, even though he was well aware and personally grateful that Bishop kept the secrets of many, if not most of the psychics he dealt with, and that he shared such information with others only when it was absolutely necessary. As usual, we have more questions than answers about an agent or operative's abilities. Some things don't change, Maggie said, then added immediately, Bishop, did you know Nash had contacted Haven? Yeah. But not from him? No. Have you told him you have an agent in place? Bishop replied, unless you've told him differently, he didn't know Cole Jacoby has been located. Maggie looked at her husband with raised brows. Did he answer my question? Not exactly. Relenting, Bishop said, no, I haven't told Nash or anyone else outside the SCU that I have an agent in Tennessee and that she located Jacoby days ago. The instant Nash is informed of Jacoby's location, he'll mount a full-scale operation to get his fugitive with the director's blessing. Everyone wants that $10 million found. I'm less concerned with recovering the stolen money than I am with determining the extent of Jacoby's psychic abilities. For now, at least. And she doesn't know yet? Maggie asked. Not as of her last report hours ago. She says the whole area around him is dark, and she didn't mean it was because he's in a cabin in the woods. Something out there, something in or around Jacoby, is producing a lot of negative energy, but so far she hasn't risked getting closer to try to figure out whether it's Jacoby or something or someone else. Energy with a purpose? Maggie asked. Also something we don't know yet, but negative energy is usually being channeled or otherwise controlled, especially if it's confined to one area or person. Mildly, John said, you might have warned us the armed felon we were hired to find was also likely to be psychic. Or was it part of your master plan to have a Haven operative on the scene? The question wasn't as mocking as the words made it seem. More practically, Maggie asked, is that why you sent only one agent instead of the usual team? Because we were sending an operative? Again, not exactly answering the question, Bishop said, I knew Luther would be the operative chosen to go in, and he needs to be there. Why? Maggie asked. To save my agent's life. After she saves his, of course.